On your way back for the holidays, try not to crash into any fragments of silicon.
All right, welcome to season 21 of Fragments of Silicon. Technically speaking, we already kicked off the season with our inaugural Sunday reviews, but this is the start of the main uh portion, if you will. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me as always are Galax and Petty. Um, right, so let's get to what we did during the break. Starting with you, Petty, because it's not been good times.
I got COVID. It
Uh,
sucks. Don't get COVID, kids.
I mean, I'm sure Mac will be able to relate profusely, considering he's caught it like twice.
Well, it's like my sister over this past week. My sister was supposed to be going to see. My mom and sister were supposed to go see our niece and my other sister,
Uh-huh.
and they couldn't because COVID happened.
Right.
So that sucked. Um, But yeah, as far as other things during the break when I wasn't feeling like death warmed over, I managed to grab a few games off the various wintry sales. I got the new Beyblade X game on the Switch because I am having they're calling it a hydrogen breath test. It's to test like if you have an overgrowth of bacteria in your small intestine, and that takes about 3 hours each visit and there it's 3 visits. So I figured I might as well get a new game on the Switch to have something to play while I have to sit around the doctor's office for 3 hours.
What was that? Just available in the bargain bin?
It was full price double A, like
Like,
$35.
like I didn't know they made games like that anymore.
It
Like,
well, it's Japanese audio and there's not too much to it, but I've been really interested in Beyblade for like
God,
ever.
still, that's a then and now situation because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's been no shortage of Beyblades
Oh yeah.
games over the years, but they were always heavily localized.
This
Like,
they have the localized text, but they don't have the voice actors. Mostly
yeah,
because
because
development started before the English cast was finalized. So it was either
Also funny
delayed.
because they tend to change the names of about three-quarters of the
They
Beyblades.
do, yes.
yeah,
And it was either delay the game worldwide for a few months or say screw it and it have just Japanese audio with English text.
I'm like, they must have been asleep at the wheel with Beyblade X because I've been playing it while the kids are here, and they've got a Beyblade called Hell Knight, just straight up called Hell Knight. I'm just
Yeah. Well, it's helm, like helmet.
It's it's
like
usually less for the censorship and more for the making the name copyrightable.
Yeah.
You can copyright Dranzer, you can't copyright Dragoon
yeah.
Yes.
Still,
or trademark, whatever.
even if it's called Helm Knight, that's a little too close to Hell Knight
Well,
for
like
comfort.
the main character's blade is actually supposed to be called like Hell's Chain and
Hmm.
like Hell's Inferno. They obviously
Right.
changed those because yeah.
Yeah. That's more what I'm used to.
Yeah. And then I also got the Final Fantasy VII remake on the PS5. because it was like $30 at GameStop, and I figured, why the hell not?
The first chapter, the
Second,
interquel, or there we go, Rebirth.
yeah.
Because remember,
I
this is
keep
a
forgetting that they're,
3 game.
yeah.
This is a 3 game affair for some reason.
And for some reason, they decided to make the lull between discs 1 and 2 an entire goddamn game. You will be hearing me bitch
DLC,
about
I
Midgar
this.
was kind of.
No, this is a post Midgar.
Oh,
Yeah,
That filler bullshit.
okay.
yeah,
No, I was gonna say making Midgar a whole game by itself isn't really uncalled for, but
Yeah,
you
Midgar
probably
itself is enough
probably
to
could
be
have
a
done
full
most
game.
of the rest in just one.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, we can talk about the ins
Yeah.
and outs of the Final Fantasy VII remake at a much later time.
Yeah, we can add that to the review list, possibly at like near the end of the season, because this is going to take me a while.
Yes.
And then I
Anyway.
also got what was that third game? Live research, people. Well, I guess also in that order, while I'm looking stuff up, I've ordered my niece the My Hero Academia game on Switch.
God, I hate that. I hate the name for that thing because it's like
One's
my
Justice or whatever.
yeah, My Hero's Justice. It's like, why are you not allowed to use the actual branding?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those, especially since it's coming from Bandai Namco. Like, really, you couldn't finagle the actual My Hero Academia name?
Mm-hmm.
Like, come on, you are you. You could have paid the money.
Oh, it is Horizon Forbidden West.
Oh, yeah, I picked up the remake of the first game on
Yeah.
Steam not too long ago, simply
Yeah.
because it was $10.
Oh yeah. It's definitely worth it at $10. I played the first game. I have it. Like, I could upgrade to the PS5 version, but why? I don't own a 4K display.
I mean, apparently it takes advantage of the PlayStation 5 Pro as well.
Something I will never own. Good to know.
Yeah.
And then
Anyway,
I guess I kind of mentioned is I also went to a Digimon tournament, like literally the week after the week break started, and brought home COVID. So that was fun. I managed to dodge COVID for 4 freaking years. And then I even went to like 2 64-man Digimon tournaments, not even a sniffle. Come back, go to a small local event, and then I end up bringing back the COVID. And I just thought I had a nasty head cold because I didn't have any of the other symptoms. And then mom and dad get sick, so sick they had to stay home from work. Because you know how it works with jobs where if you need to stay home from work for an amount of time, you need to go get a doctor's excuse. And they went to urgent care and was like, oh, yeah, you got COVID. And it's like, fuck.
anyway.
So, yeah, that's fun. So, yeah, not really a whole lot got done. I wanted to get more into streaming Digimon World, but since I couldn't talk for about 2 weeks, that had to be pushed off.
Just as well.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So yeah, I think that's it from me.
Alex, your turn.
Well, my cousin and my sister and her boyfriend and their new baby came up for Thanksgiving, and that was nice to finally get to meet the baby. It's still only like 3 months old, so still pretty much in the eternal eat, cry, poop, sleep, repeat loop. But
Not even aware that Uncle Golok is human.
I mean, she reacts a little bit, but
Mm.
I did some singing to her and patting her, and I got to hold her for a little while, but
Just don't shake the baby. Apparently parents get mad when you do that.
I did not, and she has a thing with, like, I guess her shoulders or something are super tense, so her head is more back than usual, so it was a little bit awkward to hold, and she had a tendency to start crying after a bit, so not for
Mm,
very long.
Mm.
Not for taking it personally, but just because you know I don't know what to do about it. So,
yeah.
but yeah, she only has about like the normal amount of weird baby health problems.
Yeah. Babies are in general weird, yes.
hmm So yeah, that was nice.
Mm.
In between things, I decided since I'd been a bit curious about them, I downloaded the demos on Steam for the two new Indie Creates games, Card and Ciel and Divine whatever Flame Frit. They're pretty fun. So I ended up buying the full versions, but I haven't really played them yet.
Mm.
Unfortunately, since then. Flame Frit is pretty fun, but I think it's only a two-button game basically, and it's like one of the face buttons, and it's like face button and opposing shoulder button, and that's weird, at least mostly, but that's pretty good. And Card on Sale it is a fully card-based kind of like a Mega Man Battle Network thing, but there's always a lot of stuff to like you don't move when you want. You have to use cards to move, and everything is triggered by you're playing cards, and then on the enemy's turn they do a number of things, and that not usually about one thing each, I think. But there's a lot of information between what areas your cards threaten, what areas your opponents are threatening, how many actions they're going to attack in, which directions your cards let you move, because if you don't use the cards for an attack, you can use them to move, but each card moves in a particular direction. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of technicality to deck building and stuff in that. Um, but yeah, that's the main thing I was doing aside from a bit of trying to keep up in Splatoon 3. I didn't end up finishing the catalog but for the last season, but there wasn't really anything particular on it. They don't have new content now, just more opportunities to get old stuff mostly. Aside, I guess some of the titles might be new. I don't know. So yeah, that was there's that. I've done a little bit of Christmas shopping, but not a ton yet. Got some more of that to do. But thankfully, because I was only slightly less bad at using my ETO this year um, than last
Mm.
year, I'm getting to take Thursdays and Fridays off for most of the rest of the month, so that'll be nice.
Mm.
Um, I think that's about it. I don't really
All right.
can't think of it. Mac is. I'm in talks with Mac. He wants to start back up our strategy, whatever thing it ends up being, because Sundays was never really the best day, and his schedule is completely different, and my schedule is also different. So I'm trying to figure out what day would work best.
Mm.
Uh, and we'll see how that goes. I think that's about it.
Anyway, um, right. So I guess it's my turn. Got to keep this brief since time is of the essence here, since we got
Right,
both
sorry.
shows coming back. It's not your fault.
It's mostly mine because I broke.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, that being said, the break was pretty quiet. For Thanksgiving, well, had the usual family up for Thanksgiving. Um, you know, my sides were a lot healthier than everyone else's since I insisted on having a lot less carbs and a lot more cheese covered spinach. Just not half bad, properly prepared. Let's see, and been gearing up for Christmas. Like the Christmas tree's been brought. Well, we got a new one and has been decorated.
Real
So,
tree or fake tree?
oh, a fake tree. Nobody like I've dealt with real trees.
I
I never again.
I have a friend who
Like,
still gets a real tree every year, and I wonder what the hell drugs they're on.
yeah, I'm like,
I was
I
talking
don't.
about this at work with some people the other day, and it kind of depends on where you live. On like getting a real tree in Maine is probably environmentally better than getting a fake tree in the long run, just because there's a ton of pine trees all over everywhere. But in like places that are further from natural pine
You know,
forests,
here in Missouri, where we're too flat for pines.
Yeah, I'm like,
flat and or warm or whatever, I
I
don't
could
know.
get
Yeah,
I could get pine trees back in Virginia,
Hmm.
pretty easily. It's just maintaining a real living Christmas tree.
yeah.
And
Yeah. Also, they're usually good for like 2 weeks, not the whole month.
yeah, it's like I can attest to that because of all the pine needles. I and the rest of my family had to vacuum up.
At least
Hmm.
it
Like,
doesn't contribute microplastics.
I suppose,
I mean, I guess it also
but
depends how long your tree survives. You know, if you get
Hmm.
like
mhm,
7 seasons out of one plastic tree, then that's better than replacing a real one every year.
mm.
Possibly, it depends.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, in terms of gaming, spent the break playing Half-Life 2 in celebration of its 20th anniversary. Dipped a bit into the episodes before I got tired of Half-Life 2. I honestly, it's a bit of an exhausting game.
Hmm.
Uh, and unlike other people, I'm not completely in love with all of the design choices it made.
We'll be
Like,
getting into that in like an hour.
probably a bit less,
Yeah,
but
fair.
um, and I too have picked up a stack of games, and I'm now over 3,000 games on Steam officially. Um, Unofficially, it's been over that for a while because it no longer registers like games you get by a code
Hmm.
for whatever reason. But let's see, I picked up the complete version of Aliens Fireteam Elite, Toy Soldiers HD, the a couple of the recharged games, like a whole bunch of stuff. Salt and Sanctuary, Salt and Sacrifice. You
Dang it, I
know,
forgot to get Rocket Knight. Oh well, I can probably get that on the winter sale.
yeah, like there'll be another sale,
Yeah.
like in a few weeks. Um, so don't worry too much about that.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, so as far as right now goes, my main game is Okami. Like, um,
Honestly
I
keep
what
forgetting that was ported to PC.
I'm like, Okami's been ported a lot of places.
I know, I
We
just
do it
forgot the PC one existed.
like honestly,
Unfortunately, most of the ports don't have the frickin' ending song.
I'm like it's still a bit odd that out of all of the Clover games, this is the one that keeps getting it re-released,
Hmm.
considering how much of a failure it was. Um,
Yeah. It that
um,
literally ended the company failed.
no, it was God Hand that
I thought
and
this came out was the last game. I totally forgot about God Hand.
like could have been a 1-2 punch, honestly, because those
Probably
two
was.
like those two did come out really close to each other.
Hmm.
Like, um, but you'd think Beautiful Joe, considering that was successful, like selling over 1 million copies.
It was
Um,
one of those successful but not successful enough type deals.
Maybe, but it was still successful enough to spawn a mini franchise. Like, there's a lot. There are way more Beautiful Joe games than I would have ever expected, and considering that at least the first one sold. quite a few copies. Like I think more than Capcom did. You'd think that would be the one that would keep getting re-released, or we'd be getting more beautiful Joe collections, not Okami. But here we are.
Hmm.
Anyway, um, so I think that's about it for now. Um, so merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week is Crashtroid, representing, among others, Red Nexus Games.
Hey, my name's Crashtroid. I do music for Red Nexus Games, a couple other
Hmm.
companies, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, that's why I say representing instead of, because you're a freelancer, if I'm remembering correctly. You know,
Right.
it's just your most recent releases, the past two, have been for Red Nexus, like in terms of compositions.
Uh, yeah, in terms of like major Steam releases, like fully shipped titles, that's the last two have been Peglin and Foul Damage, both with Red Nexus Games. I have done other stuff, but a lot of it has
Hmm.
been a lot of like smaller projects or for fun slash uh for portfolio stuff, you know?
Now, I'm sure we'll get into that a bit um, when the time comes. But first, we like to begin these things at the beginning. In that, what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Um, like, are we talking about playing games or working in games when you mention
Um,
that?
it's both. That's the
Both,
personal
okay.
and the professional.
Well, I guess when it comes to like how I got started with games like as a whole, it was like hand-me-down consoles from my uncle. I got a PlayStation 1 and a Super Nintendo, and games like Donkey Kong Country and Crash Bandicoot 2 were really instrumental parts of my history. It was the kind of thing that I could share with my brothers, and because none of the three of us were good enough at games to finish them on our own, it was a really important bonding experience for all of us to be able to like share in the challenge of those games and celebrate completing them and seeing those through. Um, I think the turning point for working in games was switching from a high school that had a like music program to one that didn't, and then wondering what I could do to continue like having music be a part of my life. And I've always loved video game music. It's always been really important to me, but I didn't really think about making it on my own until I had band taken away from me and I was no longer performing music. And I was like, what am I gonna do now? And then someone had mentioned, you could always try writing your own music. That's something I see people do. Um, and as I started to do that, I realized I'm allowed to make whatever music I want, which means I don't need to make the stuff that I was playing in middle or high school. I don't need to make any specific genre. And I can take inspiration from wherever I want. And the most important inspiration to me was a lot of like Nintendo, Sony, and a handful of PC games.
Like, I'm gonna guess that some of the video game standards, for lack of a better term, would be in that conversation. Mario, Zelda, Kirby, what have you. But what would be some of the off-kilter titles that nobody
Uh,
would be able to guess in terms
What's
of
really
influence?
funny, okay, I'm gonna pull up my backlog here so I can get some like very specific names for you. But what's funny is like I never actually had Zelda games growing up. I didn't have Kirby games beyond Kirby Air Ride, which I think is the worst selling game in the franchise. Um,
Hmm.
like a lot of the franchises that I think people were very accustomed to hearing about when they hear like people who were inspired to work in games are not franchises I got to pick up. The like biggest one that I think people probably don't think about very much anymore with the early stuff is like Donkey Kong Country 3. Specifically, 3 is like the one that's kind of left off and not really talked about because it went through a major art style change and the composer switched from David Wise to Evelyn Fisher. It
Right.
also came out like after the N64 had already like superseded the Super Nintendo. So it was kind of a
Hmm.
weird time. But that game was very important to us. Let's see. Let's sort this by release date. I can get you some like
Okay.
really niche stuff. Soul
Sure.
Edge was a really important one to me.
Mm.
It was like the first game in the Soul Calibur franchise for anyone who doesn't know.
Before
Underrated
they
And
soundtrack.
introduced the non-evil magic sword.
exactly, it was way before that, and it was called at the time Soul Blade. And I think
Hmm.
its arcade variant was Soul Edge. So I
Other way
played that a
around.
lot. Really?
Soul.
Because
No, yeah,
the
it's
It's
play.
Soul
some
Edge.
it's some weird thing with the
Yeah.
localization. I think it is just
No,
Soul Edge in Japanese.
no, yeah,
It definitely is,
No,
yeah.
it's Soul Edge in the arcades, and because of certain copyright factors, um, it was Soul Blade on the PlayStation.
I
Um,
see. Okay, so that's why I know it as Soul Blade then, because I
yeah.
never saw it in arcades or in Japan for that matter.
I
That one was
definitely.
really instrumental to me. I like that one a lot.
Hmm,
Let's see. Crash Bandicoot 2, I feel like is the least talked about slash celebrated of the original Crash trilogy, but it's still relatively big in terms of historical games. So
I
I don't know if I'd
would.
call that niche.
Yeah, I would disagree with that. Like Crash Bandicoot 2 is often cited as the best. It's either 2 or 3. Like
Yeah.
I would I have yet to meet the person that thought the very first Crash Bandicoot game was the best
You could probably
And
I
throw.
don't necessarily
between
like.
2 and 3, I think a lot of it, the ranking depends on when the particular player doing the rating got tired of all the added missions.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when I say that like two is the least recognized of the three, it's really just like most of the people that I see that have played all three prefer three, and then most of the people who only know Crash from like a one-off brush with the game only know Crash 1. It's very infrequently that I talk to someone about Crash as a franchise and they happen to have played it enough that they actually know about all three of the original trilogy and still prefer two over three. I feel like there's a very like more is more with Crash 3 that people really appreciate, but I prefer 2 in that like
Uh,
um it just has less things to deviate from the platforming. It has a couple vehicles, but not like one every stage like Crash 3
yeah.
does.
Yeah, Crash Bandicoot 3 just absolutely went overboard with the vehicles levels. Um
Hmm. Let's see
but
here.
anyway, um
Uh, I don't know. Would you consider Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door to be in any way niche? I don't know if it was in the GameCube era, but it's not anymore because of that remake.
I mean, I guess in the sense that it's an RPG, but like even the GameCube version sold like almost 2 million copies, I want to say.
That's more
Like
than I thought, yeah.
um like I said, it's niche for Mario, but in terms of JRPGs, not really.
Yeah,
Like
I was not a JRPG guy. I got some really basic ones, like the
now, if you
Mario
want,
ones.
if you want a niche RPG series on the Nintendo GameCube, the Lost Kingdom, Bots and Kaitos, even Tales of Symphonia would count. Over Paper Mario.
Hmm.
Like, um, anyway, I'm sure we could go down the list title by title, but I think that gives a good framework to your background influences um, to creating works in the musical landscape. Um,
Hmm.
Now, at what point did you reach like doing soundtrack for games and stuff like that?
So that came around kind of in like high school time, where I had like a demo license for FL Studio, which was like my music creation software. And I was kind of like floating around Facebook groups and like DeviantArt forums and other places where like other types of artists slash programmers would be, um, and just kind of like see if I could work my way into working on somebody else's project. And I would have been content to do it for free, but I came across somebody who was like taking a risk working on their first mobile game. It was just a simple like 2D platformer. Uh, and they were like deviating from their original job, which was graphic design. And because of that, I guess they had a smaller budget to work with, wanted to work with someone that they could get a whole soundtrack for a reasonable price, which would have been high school me. So I got some cash and I actually used that to pay for the license in order to like buy the actual software that I still use to this day, which I think is really cool. He basically funded the beginning of the official career-driven music journey, which I think is pretty neat. That was in like grade 10, I think.
Hmm. So how long have you been composing video game music overall?
Overall, since like late middle school, so that would put it at like probably 11 years now, I would
Oh.
say. Professionally, I've only been doing this about 2 years. Like it
Hmm.
hasn't really been a huge focus. It's always been the, oh yeah, like if I can do this full time, I would, but there's no way that's ever gonna happen. And then it happened, and so now I do it.
Looks at the camera.
Yeah, if I had a camera to look at, yeah, I would
Yeah.
have done the like Jim from The Office thing.
Uh, so I suppose that begs the question: what was the catalyst for you being able to make this a full-time gig?
The unbelievable, still to this day, success and celebration of Peglin. Um, the people I worked with on Peglin, everybody in Red Nexus games are people I know from my hometown that I worked with at like game jams. So I would show up to like game developer events throughout the city and like I would meet them and see them over time, right? Dylan, May, Lucas, Sienna, all of these people who currently work at Red Nexus Games. We're just friends over time, right? And then eventually, I think, yeah, it was during COVID, and while I was still going to university, Dylan had approached me and been like, "Hey, um, we're working on this project so that we don't get cabin fever, right? We're just doing this for fun. We don't think it's going to be like a big thing. So if you want, like, we can contract you to do some music for it, and it would be fun." Um, and so, just wanting to participate in the art of making games, I said yes. But it also turns out that the game kind of grew legs more than I guess any of us were anticipating. People really loved it. It released in early access. Um, People bought copies. That gave us enough money to sustain ourselves and continue working on it. 2 years pass, and I'm like struggling to balance working on games and finishing my degree, which is in like elementary education. So I'm busy doing like school stuff. I'm in my fifth year. Like it's crazy intensive. I'm just trying to make sure that I stay alive in the games industry, like making music for Peglin and a couple other things. And then we had our 1.0 launch in 2024. I think it was in September this year that we launched 1.0. And it's just been celebration. Like people love the game and we love making it. And, if people like the game, they tend to pay money for it. So, it turns into a viable approach.
I mean, I tell you, it's good to hear of video game success stories because let's just say they've been in short supply in recent times.
What,
Like,
games?
yes, like um, it's been a running commentary on our program,
Yeah.
especially like over the past season,
Yeah.
where people are, getting worried about their projects, succeeding.
Few
Oh,
friends of the show,
yeah.
they've lost their studios.
Oh, yeah. No. When it comes to like commercial viability of games and, keeping
Yeah,
studios alive, that's been pretty bad lately.
yeah.
Uh,
So, but
yeah.
we don't need to tread down that road this week. Like, um, now I suppose we should get into Peglin itself because, um, so it describes itself as a pachinko roguelike,
Hmm.
um, which means, I've seen game footage. It looks like Peggle, like, um,
Yeah, I would liken it to that for sure.
you know, uh, and it's I want to like I'm trying to figure out what the main character is. Is it a goblin? Like,
Yeah. Well, like a subspecies of goblin that we call Peglin. The funny
yeah,
thing is that the main character is both Peglin by species and Peglin by name. And throughout the game, you'll meet other Peglins that have like names, Haglin, Gamblin. There's a couple pun names in there and some secret ones too. But the only one that's actually named after the species of like Pachinko Goblin is the playable character.
Hmm. Um, Makes sense, I suppose. Um, and I suppose it's worth asking how involved were you in the creation of Peglin? Were you just the composer, or were you like there from, when this game was first being planned?
Well, I got in at about the point where there was like a functional gameplay demo. Like, everything actually worked. You could deal damage, enemies would move properly. Um, but I was kind of getting there just as like that product had been completed. The entire like art direction of the game, like a lot of the lore stuff and things like that hadn't been decided yet. So I got in relatively early compared to what our product looks like now. But really, most of my involvement has been in the audio sphere. So like I've, tweaked a couple sound effects. I've written all the music, but
Hmm.
in terms of affecting like gameplay systems, I haven't been doing any of that.
No,
That's the other guys.
yeah, wasn't expecting that. I'm just wondering at what point did you come in to make the music for the game?
Um, I guess it would be like maybe a year before we launched into early access or so. Uh, because it was expected to be just kind of a like, let's do this for fun. Let's goof around. Let's make a little silly game about a green guy. It was supposed to be something a lot smaller, and so there was a lot less pressure, right? They had come up with a game for me to play. I could complete the first stage of the current three stages in the game because we only had the forest. So you get from point A to point B in the forest. Um, and there was only one boss. There was no mini bosses, maybe only a handful of encounters. uh so it was a roguelike. It was a functional roguelike, but there wasn't really any variation to speak of. So we were at that point where our systems were
Hmm.
functional, but we needed more stuff in order to vary up the experience as people would continue to play it.
And I suppose the question that beckons here is, did your approach change as the game changed? Because it sounds like everything on Peglin got a lot more mm, ambitious, or bigger, something along those lines.
I think you can chalk up the ambition to the fact that like the support that we got in early access meant that a lot of us could focus way more time on it.
Hmm.
Right. I actually ended up being away from school for a year, not necessarily just to focus on Peglin, but um, being part of the Peglin team afforded me that, and it allowed me to be way more involved when writing music and doing all sorts of little audio stuff. And in the same way, I'm sure that not having to dump all of your time into a regular full-time job also freed up some of the other guys on the team to change things up.
Hmm.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
feel
that
like
makes
the
sense.
original question got away from me. What was the original question?
I'm like, my question is, did your composing approach change
Oh,
as the
right,
game
right.
evolved?
Um, I don't really think so. The approach I think was distinctly different than what I had done before because I had gotten in when there was a playable demo, right? Being able to play the game and understand the mechanics from the player's point of view changed the way that I wrote music for the game. But after that, as we added more content and as time went on, I feel like the identity of Peglin was kind of set in
Mhm.
stone. And from there, it was just like, let's do more, let's do better, right? I didn't
Yeah.
end up
It's definitely
tweaking
one of those
anything
they
and going
probably
back on
would
it.
you probably would have changed more if you were just at the concept art stage, not
Oh, it would have
playable
been
stage.
radically different. You definitely. I don't think a lot of the ideas that I had for the music would have been there at all. Like it would have been
Hmm.
totally different.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. So are you pleased with how things turned out?
More than I can ever really express, yeah. Um, Peglin has been a literal life changer for both me and I would also claim the rest of the team. Um, a lot of us work full time in games now. A lot of us we've made a lot of friends. We've been to a lot of places and seen a lot of other games. It's just kind of like I personally have never really believed that I could be part of the game industry, being that like I'm not very good at programming and I'm not a visual artist. And uh, I just kind of thought to myself, yeah, it's too competitive and my parents don't know anything about it. There's no way I'm ever going to do this. Peglin is the enabling factor in letting me participate in the games industry. So, regardless of whether or not I improve on my music and I look back at Peglin's soundtrack and I'm like, yeah, I could have done better, and it's a little embarrassing now. I'm never going to
Right.
forget about the opportunities that Peglin has opened for me and the kind
Hmm.
of like
Me
life that I lead now.
knowing that there's a game development thing that I actually done that if it sees the light of day, three other people are dead.
Hmm. Blackmail material. Like, um. Anyway, so is Peglin still being worked on post release? Like any sort of DLC being planned for the game?
Uh, I have nothing to say about DLC. I do know that we are currently working on an update for like a final act of the game. We have three acts in the game currently, and they're all about the same duration. So you have the forest, then you have the castle, and then you have the mines. Each of them is like a full, I would say, like Slay the Spire-esque map type thing, where you get from top to bottom, you travel to a bunch of nodes, and there's a boss at the end of each of them. But we kind of wanted one more final test. I've never personally played Slay the Spire, but the comparison that I make is the Risk of Rain 2 Voidling fight, um,
Hmm.
where it's kind of like here's a boss fight for people who are already adept with like breaking the game, and the final boss is no longer a challenge for them. So we need something that's just literally unfair because that way people who break the game on a regular basis, um, they can
Mm,
finally use that build against something and have it be interesting and not just, one shot everything. So our
ah,
final act is going to be much shorter, but it's going to be much tougher. And it's an optional kind of like last hurrah for your build, you know?
yeah, yeah. That's the Lode Runner Championship Edition School of Game Design,
Mm,
like or Super Mario Brothers 2 Japan. You know, it's something that's been seen in the video game industry for decades. Like, you make an extra hard game for the ultra masters of said game,
hmm
like which it tends to be too hard for mere mortals.
It's kind of what
Like,
we're hoping, yeah.
yeah,
That's what I'm
uh,
hoping. I can't speak on behalf of everybody else. I'm hoping
sure.
it's too tough for mere mortals.
I'm like, mm, I suppose we'll see how that pans out. Now, are you changing up the music any to match the difficulty? Like faster tempo, that kind of deal.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. As we go through the soundtrack from like the first three stages of the game, right? There's a very like happy, bubbly kind of Crash Bandicoot sound, which then
Mm-hmm.
starts to incorporate an eight-string guitar, which you would normally hear in like games that have metal music, but I brought it in, I mixed it with some stuff and fits pretty well. But the pace starts to pick up as the challenge rises in the regular stages of the game, right? Through instrumentation, like you said, through like the pace of the music. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and right now, I think through the boss themes is the best way of like seeing that progression uh, of intensity, I guess, is the best way of putting it. And
Yeah.
I have a couple ideas. I don't want to share them yet because it's a little bit of a spoiler. But like, I do have ideas about exactly how I'm going to sell this as like the final finality of Peglin. Right? This is the biggest bad that you have. I also really want to break out of some of the standard traditions of the Peglin soundtrack so far, just to really sell how different it is. But I'm not going to tell you how because it's that'll be a really fun update to drop on everyone. So I'm doing my best not to spoil anything for anybody.
Fair enough. Especially since that's a thing that's not out yet.
Hmm It's still being worked on, and we're hoping to have it soon. TM.
Yes, it's when it's done, registered. Like,
I should
uh,
get a T-shirt with that.
yeah. I'm surprised there isn't one.
I'm I would honestly be shocked if there wasn't.
I'm
Like,
personally partial to the Katsuhiro Harada T-shirt, the Tekken guy. It just says
hmm,
"Don't ask me for shit."
yeah, I've
That's my
seen it.
favorite.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised if New Blood put out a when it's done T-shirt. Like,
New Blood has some T-shirts, man. They
I'm
got
a
some crazy
we
ass
are we
T-shirts.
are aware New Blood are some homies.
Yeah.
yeah. We've had them on the program.
Really?
Yeah, David's character.
Yep,
Hmm.
can
Like,
confirm.
it's been a while, but that's mainly because David has been in New Zealand for the past couple years. Like, kind of messes with the schedule. But
Hmm.
anyway, so Peglin has also been put on the Nintendo Switch recently, if I'm remembering correctly. How did
Yeah.
that release go?
Um, I mean, as far as I know, with the limited information I got, it's been pretty good. Everybody I've heard who's played the game primarily on Switch has really liked it. Um, I don't really have any numbers or nothing, but anecdotally, I can tell you like a lot of people were waiting for Peglin to kind of come to a more mobile platform. A lot of people bought it and played it on Steam Deck, which is
Mhm.
awesome. And I'm more of a Steam Deck guy, but undeniably like the Switch's like install base is just much larger. And so there was a lot of people who were like, I can't wait for Peglin on the Switch specifically because that's the thing that I love to play my indie games on.
Yeah.
And they have
Also,
all been
the
very
Switch
happy.
is much cheaper than getting a Steam Deck. Like, yeah, the Steam Deck's more powerful, but I
Hmm.
could easily justify getting my niece a $150 Switch instead of a what's it now, almost $400 Steam Deck.
Hmm.
Depends on the model.
The
Because
useful one's like $400. The other one, you still need to put a
uh,
hard drive in it.
yeah, like the useful one's more $600. Like,
Hmm.
uh, anyway, but that's beside the point. But it's good to hear that the Switch version has been doing well as well.
Hmm.
Um, and I suppose it's worth going back a bit because we've got the game on display here, but we haven't actually talked about Foul Damage, which is the other Red Nexus game that you've worked on.
Yeah.
Um, and this is a curious beast, if you'll allow the wordplay, because it's
Ah.
a egg themed Metroidvania.
Hmm.
Like,
Well,
and
I don't
I'm
know.
like,
Does it fit into the Metroidvania category?
Not really. Like, unless you add stuff after the demo, it's more just a
like,
platformer. It
uh,
looks like a Metroidvania.
It
that
certainly
might have
does
been,
look that way.
yeah, that might have been what was throwing me off here. Like,
Yeah.
the point is, it's still it's an egg themed platformer where you're actually playing as an egg.
Hmm.
Yeah, as opposed to like a chicken. Um, I've seen that quite a bit
Right.
actually, where you have something connected to eggs, but it's chicken eggs.
That was shockingly popular in the 360 generation. I have no idea why.
I couldn't
Yeah, I
tell you,
couldn't tell you.
but like actually playing as the egg. I won't say it's never happened before, but how many people, especially in North America, remember Dizzy?
Raises hand sheepishly.
Impressive. Or um, has that been mentioned on this program before? Um, right, but right, the Steam description describes it as a puzzle platformer, an atmospheric one at that. Which is
Hmm.
once again strange for an egg themed platform game. Like, once again, you see an egg platforming, you think whimsical, maybe comedic, not atmospheric. So, I suppose the actual question here is, how did you come up with the music for such a strange title?
It's actually a good question because I had a lot to work off of with this one. I have been playing the samples that May has been giving me. She's the lead dev on this game. It was really her baby, and she brought it like to Red Nexus to help like basically wrap things up. I've been playing the samples that she's been giving me forever, and she wrote a lot of the music in it actually. I think the game had like 3 or 4 songs in it by the time that we were pretty close to launch. And then she said that she wanted a little bit more music in it. But she was really busy with, tying up systems, bug fixing, like making sure that everything functions. So she asked me to write a few songs for it. Uh, it's really interesting because I don't think I've ever done anything like this where I got to take her themes and her ideas and then iterate on those instead of writing something completely original. So I guess, yeah, the first time I've ever worked with a pre-established sound, um, yeah, it's just something I've never done before. It resulted in like a stronger piano focus, something I don't usually use at all in my soundtracks. And it was her main instrument. So I ended up having to figure out how to write those lines more realistically and, make those sound good and integrate well. Um, and I was also given the back half of the game, right? The areas that are a little bit more tense or challenging.
Right.
So with my more like I don't want to say like upbeat, but more the more sporadic nature of the way that I write my music really worked with the end of that game because uh, it was the more like distinct challenge areas, including the final boss, where I got to kind of take May's ideas, iterate on those, and then come up with something a little bit more punchy. Does that make sense? I don't know if I was just rambling. Does that make sense?
I think it does.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I've never done that. It's pretty cool. Working on pre-established stuff is actually really, really neat.
Hmm. I'm like, is it something you would do again?
100%. Yeah. I think it would really depend on whether I agree to do it or not as to whether I think I can do it justice. Like if you
Hmm.
gave me like, I don't know, a giant JRPG with, anime visuals and stuff, I don't know if I could really do that justice. But if you gave me like, a 2.5D beat 'em up with a little bit of like a Yakuza aesthetic, I'm all over it, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of things that I feel like I can do well in music, and then there's certain things that I know that I can't do very well. And so if I were to work on another pre-established idea or soundtrack or something, I'm sure there would be something I can contribute, but I would be worried about only a handful, like small select handful of types of games, stuff that I'm not personally like familiar with, you know?
Well, I mean, I suppose that's another question to ask. Do you
Mm.
do any composing outside of video games?
It's a good thing you ask. I just finished that. Yeah.
It's
It
funny
was
how that
on
works. It's
December
almost
1st.
like it's a lead.
I don't think you
Yes.
guys knew that though. On December 1st, I finished my first film scoring project ever, which was a lot of fun. I also learned a lot. It was super difficult. I can't talk a whole lot about it, but the project is called Baptism by Fire. It's a kind of bank heist slash kung fu movie, like animation. It's about 7.5 minutes long. Uh, so I was working with one of my friends from Newgrounds on that. His name's Wizardo Frank, and he's been doing that as one of his 3D animation projects. So while I finished the soundtrack on December 1st, I'm still tweaking around with it to like get almost like a director's cut type thing so that we can do a full release of the movie in like February, I think. Probably February.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, um, I would like to inquire more, but if you can't talk about it, you can't talk about
Oh, I
it.
mean, like if you ask any question you want, I will tell you if I can't say something about it. I have several things to say about it, but we won't know if that lines up with what you want to know unless you got a particular question.
No, it's fine.
This is probably
That's
more
really,
suited for the other show anyway.
yeah, I was about to say, like, films, film stuff that's for our other program. This tends to be about focusing on the games and the game dev.
Hmm. I will say one thing about it though. I think the reason that it went over so well is because there's so many game inspirations for it, right? The
Hmm.
the the most of the stuff that I drew from it, where like a lot of the Yakuza soundtracks, a lot of the Judgment soundtracks, so stuff by like RGG Studios, because there's a lot of combat, there was a lot of emotion in it, and both of us just happened to be fans of RGG. It was really easy to kind of like look at these scenes and then talk to him and be like, "This feels like this part of like Yakuza 5, don't you think?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, it does." And then it was really easy to kind of communicate about what sound would be right for it. If you had asked me to like compose music for an emotional live action student film about learning to let go of your first love or something, I don't think that would have worked for me. But because this is like um, a very video gamey type animation, it worked out great.
Well, that's good. I suppose the final question to ask at this stage is, what have been some of your non-Nexus projects? Some of the smaller stuff that you mentioned previously.
hmm a lot of that you could find on Newgrounds. That's one of the places I really like to collaborate with people. So whether it's been like other small animations, like, a minute or less, and then looks like I have 8 games to my name right now on Newgrounds. A lot of the smaller stuff that I do is either like smaller game jams where we just build something in like 3, 4 days, or it's longer term jams that have like multiple collaborators. So there's a handful of games there where like I'm one musician on like a game that has like 6 or 7. Like 360 Degrees is a skateboarding, almost like 2D Tony Hawk type thing. It's a score chasing arcade game, and one of my tracks is in there. Or Madness Severed, which is kind of like a combination between Mega Man and like classic Mega Man, where it was individual screens, and then like Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It, where I was the lead composer for the project. Got to collaborate with my friend Connor, who plays guitar, and he plays it really well. So that soundtrack turned out great.
Mm.
Um, yeah, a lot of the smaller stuff is on there, but you could also find a couple other game jams on itch. So there's a couple floating around everywhere, really.
Okay. Right. So I think I've asked all the questions I wanted to at this stage. Fellas, do you have anything further to add?
I think I'm good.
Same.
All right. So Crashtroid, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today to talk about your projects. It was a lovely conversation.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to be here, and I really appreciate you guys having me on. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no problem. Anyway, so the games are Foul Damage and Peglin. You can pick them both up on Steam. Also, Peglin is available on mobile devices and the Nintendo Switch. So be sure to pick that up on your preferred platform of choice. Petty, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. So, this week we are talking about Half-Life 2 in celebration of its 20th anniversary and its 20th anniversary update. Indeed, contrary to a lot of other developers, quite frankly, Valve actually went out and did things to one of its seminal works from its distant past at this point. Like
They've been doing things. They're still keeping it up to date for like modern OSs. It's more, more than just patches.
Yeah, you can play like the original Half-Life on Windows 10 or 11.
Yeah, because they've kept updating.
Right, but this is more referenced to the 20th anniversary updates that they've unrolled. because it's not just like graphical updates. Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they did those, um, because there's only so much you could do with Half-Life 2 in the original Source engine at this stage. Um, but what they have done is they've put in a new commentary track, and that's been released alongside a new documentary of the game that was released on YouTube. I did watch that. I honestly don't have the patience to play through video game commentary tracks,
Yeah.
especially.
I know that's
Espe-
Valve's thing, but I also know it's never been good looking at you, Portal 2.
um, but yeah, this is like a new one because they did have one recorded previously, or at least for the episodes. Speaking of the episodes, the episode 1 and episode 2 have been integrated into Half-Life 2. So you get, if you buy Half-Life 2 now, or like during the anniversary, you get it because Valve made it available for free. Um, the point is you don't have to buy the episodes separately anymore. Um, and they did add the episode achievements to the achievement list for Half-Life 2. And apparently there is a way to transfer the achievements. I don't give a shit about achievements,
Yeah.
so
Basically, it
um,
boils down to on with Steam. If you open up the save file that has like shit completed, Steam will populate them because it's
yeah,
just looking for flags.
yeah. So if you saved the gnome in episode 2, um you just do that and that achievement will transfer.
Mm.
That's the achievement that everyone was panicking over, because it's kind of hard to do.
Mm.
um Once again, it's not a thing that ever interests me because I don't really give a shit about achievements. um but the point is Valve has actually taken time out to do a pretty hefty update to the game. That's right. Um, they've also integrated Steam Workshop.
Yep.
Um, so that means mods can be done, much easier now.
You don't have to
Now,
go to a
granted,
sketchy website to mod Half-Life 2 anymore.
um, not that you really have to do that before, because Half-Life 2 has been eminently moddable since 2004.
Well, it's been moddable, but you couldn't get the mods in Steam itself, so you run the
Right.
risk of accidentally downloading malware.
Yeah. Anyway, so they've also done some bug fixes, um, which is always a bit of a surprise. But this is apparently stuff that that's fixing what previous updates did.
Yeah.
Sometimes that happens. Um, and they do indeed have new graphic options.
Yep.
But they're being a bit vague about it because they say, and I quote here, and we've added some settings to push the visual fidelity of Half-Life 2 farther than was allowed in the original release. Well, that doesn't mean much because honestly, 1080p is what was farther than what was allowed in 2004.
Yeah. And they also don't even. Wait, why the fuck is it 7? I'm glad I looked at that because I hate 75-degree FOV. But yeah, and just looking at all of the options
Yeah, an FOV slider, that's definitely something that was more recent.
I
Because in
I
2000,
vaguely remember you had to put in console commands to change your FOV.
FOV sliders were a thing in 2004,
Yeah,
even on PC. It just PC FPSs used to be, they were better attuned to like 90, 100-degree FOVs versus the 75, 70 degree FOVs you got on consoles because of where people usually sit in relation to PCs and consoles.
right.
You know, um,
Oh, they actually have full gamepad support now for the
yes,
the psychopath who wants to play Half-Life 2 with a gamepad. I know
I
you
can't like
exist, but you seek help.
Yeah, I could do that for Halo because that's a
Look,
game that was designed for the
I
Xbox.
consider using a controller just because I don't like keyboard and mouse, but I do recognize that shooting is worse that way, and also I don't like first-person games to start with.
Well, I'm not gonna lie, if you do use a controller for Half-Life 2, you might as well just select easy. That's not a statement of, you know, PC master race, let's say. That's more auto aim is on with the easy mode. And it's just a fact of the matter that analog sticks are just less accurate than a mouse. Like, you know, that's an empirical fact. So auto aim is there to help um, deal with the inaccuracies of
Hmm.
analog sticks. You know, so if you're going to go that route, you might want to save yourself some frustration. Um, especially since this is a PC born FPS. You know, it was made with keyboard and mouse in mind. I know it did eventually hit consoles, first on the Xbox and then the Orange Box stuff a little bit later, but those reports, so I would still recommend playing this with a mouse and keyboard, if you can. You know, that being said, what is the legacy of Half-Life 2 these days? Like, and I think that answer is, how do I put this? Physics.
Yeah,
Um,
in more
you know,
ways than just the gun.
yeah. But like I really do think that was the big suite of innovations added to the video game landscape more than anything else.
Hmm.
Because, a lot of what Half-Life 2 is doing is just literally built off the foundations that the first Half-Life did. Um, in terms of its structure, presentation, and some of the things that they wanted to do with Half-Life 2, like having Alex as a fully playable, or having her as an AI sidekick throughout the entire game, wasn't realized until episode 1. Um, because they couldn't sort her AI out in time for the game to get released. Like, um, but yeah, um, and Half-Life 2's physics are an interesting thing to revisit here in 2024. Because while they were a giant leap forward in terms of realism in 20 years ago, they are just hopelessly cartoony these days.
Oh yeah. Like
Like,
this is the kind of stuff that's now built into stuff like Unity or Unreal. These are your basic physics engine stuff.
right. I'm like, but we have talked about physics models of the early 2000s a couple of times,
Hmm.
mainly when we had to review a remastering from that time period. Just, pointing out, the just a lack of physics, if I'm being honest. like I think it was during our review of Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy,
Probably.
where I pointed out like the boulders flying everywhere, just like having absolutely no physics applied to them, in the sense of what we would recognize as physics today, or even what they were evolving to in the mid 2000s. And Half-Life 2 was definitely an important step, um, probably a couple of steps in that direction, but not the only one, because physics models in general were becoming ragdoll physics were becoming a thing around this time. It's just, this being a PC game, and a PC game that was targeting the high end, you know,
Oh yeah, you needed a pretty beefy computer back in the day to run this. Now I'm pretty
right.
sure my toaster could run it.
Hmm. Um, Probably, putting aside compatibility issues.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. We'll need to work on that OS, that
yeah,
toaster OS.
yeah. um, but yeah, um, and it's not just, and as you mentioned, it's not just in the gravity gun, even though that is like almost the literal centerpiece of the game.
That's one of the things
Um,
everybody remembers, but
well,
there's a lot. Mhm.
they remember it because it's not just done in conjunction with, here's an I, like when I think of a gimmick like this done badly, I think to Singularity. Good
Mhm.
game, but its time manipulation gimmick is really limited because of the torturous development. Like you're mainly doing that to age and de-age boxes. And granted, you are lifting a lot of crates here, but the gravity gun is done in conjunction with Ravenholm. Like Ravenholm is one of the big set pieces for that because they deliberately limit ammo because they want you to use the gravity gun as your main weapon for that chapter. And Ravenholm is such a memorable part of the Half-Life 2 experience because, quite frankly, there's nothing else like it in the game. It's basically, stopping the sci-fi invasion to play a zombie movie. Um, and a lot of what you're doing in Ravenholm is attacking the headcrab zombies with buzz saws and exploding barrels and gas tanks and stuff that you can lift with the gravity gun, especially the
In
buzz
fairness, head
saws.
zombies is a significant component of the alien invasion to start with.
Right, but they're not really part of the combine. Um, Headcrabs are like if they had a faction, they'd be Zen, but headcrabs are not mindless parasites, but they're treated as animalistic.
Mhm. They don't give a fuck who
Especially
you are. They just want to eat.
especially with the toothless head crab Lamar. Like he's likened to a dog in this game. The point is like, yeah, head crabs are a significant part of the alien invasion, but they're not combine forces. In fact,
Shows
if
you how much I know about Half-Life, I suppose. I kind of assumed they were like some kind of weapon or something.
no, ditto the barnacles. Both head crabs and barnacles come from Half Life One. Like, two of the few carryovers from that game in terms of the alien races. Like the Combine are actually a different alien force than what you fought on Zen. In fact, you defeated that alien force. Just the Combine is a much bigger, scarier, more powerful alien force. Um, it's something you learn in the backstory of Half-Life 2, should you seek it out. the 6-hour war. Called that because that's how long it took for the Combine to take over. That was their power. Uh, uh,
Like this seesaw over here, this
yeah.
was some mind-blowing shit, and
And
back in the
this is
day.
the part of the physics I wanted to get to because
A seesaw that works on a mechanic other than just a button switches it between positions instantaneously.
yeah, it works like an actual seesaw.
Yeah, like it's actually responding to the force of tossing the cinder block on it.
And it'll respond to the weight of something.
Yeah.
And the mass. A cinder block here might not have the pressure capacity that a crate does. Little things like that, which you really didn't see in video games prior to this time period. But it's especially worth mentioning the seesaws because this is kind of the definitive Valve physics puzzle. Because dear God, did they love their seesaw puzzles, especially in the episodes. In fact, it got a bit tiresome by episode 2. It's like, really, another fucking swing, another fucking seesaw. It was kind of
yeah,
done.
you can ride the swing. Like,
yeah,
I honestly didn't even know you could do that till I just started messing with them.
This once again, this is quite a physics showcase for the time.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of what powered Valve's thinking behind Half-Life to this day. It's why we don't have a Half-Life 3. Like, it's ironic because for all of the narrative innovations that the Half-Life series has brought to the table, Valve has never really, or they haven't really considered Half-Life in those terms since the first one. By Half-Life 2 and the mid 2000s, Half-Life was Valve was taking a much more itish approach, not full on John Carmack, tech demo, video game plot lines or like porn stories levels or anything like that. But they do not feel like they have to make a Half-Life 3 out of obligation to finish the story.
Yeah.
They will only make a Half-Life 3 if they feel like they can make an innovative enough game, especially on the technological field, to make that game.
And
this is what they've...
Also, given the amount of time that has passed, the bar is very high.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bar may be insurmountable in that case. Like that, their stated reasons are because of what I just mentioned. The unstated reason, what we only learned is burnout. By the time that they were done with Half-Life 2 Episode 2, they'd been working on Half-Life stuff for about a decade there. A bit more if you include like the prototyping and everything on Half-Life 1. And they were just kind of done with it. And I can get that. Like, you've been working on nothing but this one thing for a decade. And you're just ready to move on. Unrelatedly, I just had that happen to a couple of friends we've had on the program today. They're leaving long-standing positions.
Right.
So the build-up to Half-Life 3 has only happened because it's taken so long to get a Half-Life 3. Like, there wasn't, like, if we got a Half-Life 3 3 years out, it wouldn't have the build-up in the minds that this 17-year gap has produced. I'm like, now I will grant it's only been about 4 years since Half-Life Alyx, but here's the thing. I consider Half-Life Alyx to be a cop-out. Because they wanted to make a Half-Life game.
Does it not actually sequelize, or is it just because it's a VR with a different
It's a
character?
prequel.
Ah, so yeah, not really
It's
exploring
Half-Life
significant
1.5, if I recall correctly. Yes.
So yeah, not really
Thereabouts.
exploring new parts of the timeline.
Worse, it rewrites parts of the timeline. Like, but that is a different conversation. Like, it's actually probably the most contentious part of Half-Life Alex. Or it would be if more people had played Half-Life Alex. It being a full fat VR experience means not a lot of people actually
Yeah.
experience that.
You can only experience it in VR.
Yeah. And Valve refuses to make a pancake version of the game. Because
Mm-hmm.
once again, this is Valve's ethos. They make something in service of technology. Um, it's just they actually give a shit about narrative and character, um, as opposed to once again it's software or like Epic Games, which have been far more spurious when it comes to those things. Like, but yeah. So does Half-Life 2 hold up? Mostly yes. I will say there are parts that I don't think are particularly good, but then again, I thought were not good back in the day. Like, I still hate the Antlions chapter, Sand Traps, because that is just a sequence of first-person jumping um, parts, and I hate first-person jumping parts in first-person shooter games.
Mm-hmm.
Always have, always will.
Like those are fine for like secrets. Like Halo has a few skulls where you need to do a few first-person jumping parts. That's fine. That's not required.
Yeah,
But when
I
you
just
require it, it's bad.
end up running across the field and dealing with the antlions.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, uh, I don't, I hate this jumping. It's so fucking tedious. It's like I will call that chapter a pile of bad game design choices that should have been cut from the game.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. Like, I hate it. Like, and I'm not too high on Anti-Citizen One because it's like, oh hey, we want to explore group tactics in an FPS, but because it's 2004 and that's not the focus here, it's pretty naff.
Also, getting enough of a functional AI to do that kind of stuff
Well,
in.
yeah, that's the problem. The AI is pretty bad. Um, it's like it's something that could work, um, but you have to make it your focus.
Yes.
And Half-Life 2, it didn't make it its focus, so it's not good. It's better than the escort mission that ends episode 1. I think that's my
Granted, a
least favorite
frontal
part of,
lobotomy could be a better thing than escort mission, but
especially that one. Like, I, when like I think episode 1 is overall the low point
mm-hmm.
of the Half-Life 2 experience. It's between that and the endless antlion. You got to put the beam on the fucking antlion nest, and it's so awful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but like I said, these are just parts of a greater whole. No game is perfect.
Yeah,
Like,
no matter what people say, no, Ocarina of Time is not perfect.
yeah,
It's good. It's not perfect.
yeah, it's like Half-Life 2 is a legendary game. I'm like, I still hate parts of it,
Yeah.
and I've hated those since I played the game back in 2009. I didn't have a powerful enough PC in 2004
Right.
to play Half-Life 2. Like, um, anyway, so we should probably wrap this up. In fact, we've actually gone a bit over time, so be sure to tune in for MSP happening here soon, let's say,
Soon
depending on
trademark.
how much time it takes Mac. Like, and coming up, no Friday show. And coming up on the Sunday reviews, we have reviews of The Last Friend, Sprawl, Battle Wizard Attack, and Dark Complete Edition schedule. So until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.